See, is this sort of like little blue ball spinning in the darkness and shrinking away. And again, that's really interesting as well, because it's almost like the narrator would have you believe that it suits his narrative that he is gently floating away, a victim of his own inertia, when perhaps he's actually pulling away. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Audiophiles, you bastard. My name's John, his name is Andy. Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once? More on that another time, perhaps. But first, we've got a song to listen to, chosen by brother Andy. What do you got?
John, today we are going to be returning to the Fantastic Planet. In that we are going to be checking out another song from that album. Does that ring a bell, Fantastic Planet?
Yeah, I can see the thumbnail in my mind's eye right now. Failure?
Failure, yeah, absolutely. Yep, it is another failure track. Ironically named Another Space Song. So this is another one of my favorite tracks off this, what is one of my favorite albums of the 1990s. So I'd like for you to go off, give this thing a go, and let me know what you think. But just to recap, we've done Stuck on You, Saturday Savior, and you have gone off and independently listened to The Nurse Who Loved Me, because I've given you the A Perfect Circle version of it originally back on Into the Music, which kind of sparked your curiosity and you went off and gave it a go. But here, I guess then this would be your fourth song off of this album, which is a pretty robust album in itself. I don't think we're even getting to the 1/4 mark of the entire, track list. But another indicator, I think, of how good this album is this song, Another Space Song. So please give it a go and let us all know what you think of it, my friend.
Well done. I like that start. So you've got this sort of beat, which is slightly sort of singing doom, 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 doom. And you've got this guitar, this tremolo guitar that's sort of vibrating away. And then it's joined by the second guitar, which is probably the main guitar, with this very nice, bright, pretty riff actually. And the tremolo guitar then starts rising higher and higher and higher, and you feel the tension. And it's almost like liftoff. Know what I know about this album, this band. So yeah, I really like that. Sounds great, and interesting as well. And the riff itself is just it's simple, but it's really pretty. It's nice. See how it goes.
Twisting off into
Okay, so your man starts singing. I won't labour the point. We've mentioned this before in previous reactions about how his vocals are very Cobain adjacent. Um, it's all right. I like it, but that vocal fry, that sort of rasp, it sounds great. It's hard sometimes to make out all of the words all of the time. I'm not the best at it anyway. But there was something about smiling and something about twisting into the sun. I'm sure he said at the end, it's okay to be lonely. Um, there's a lot of little things going on that make me feel like you know, floating in space. Um, and that as a metaphor as well. So there's the sort of the percussion, the drum beat is interesting because it almost sounds like this sort of not clockwork, but this mechanical nature to it. And it's just putting me in mind of propulsion, but just going on, but not like rapid, but just continuing onwards and onwards. So yeah, that last bit about being lonely is isolation. It's putting me in mind of another song, but I won't say what just yet. Let me just see how it goes. But interesting. That was interesting. Let me just, I think I got most of that, believe it or not. Let me just listen to that again. Yeah, interesting. I have to say, just before this bit, there was a "She's Always," that I don't know if that's a chorus or not. That part especially made me think of because I know this band has sort of come out of grunge, as it were, but that was the most kind of like it's uh, Pixies esque, one of their slower ones. The way it was really nice. I know I hear Pixies everywhere, but with that, Joey Santiago usually over the top will put all these like sonic flourishes on songs, and you're getting them here, but they're more like effects, and it just puts me in mind of heavenly bodies whizzing past as you're in space, but they're all at different speeds and trajectories and orbits or whatever. So there are all these different noises, and there's a bit of sort of space noise or something going on, if that's the vessel you're in. But I'm not sure if it's still going or if it's floating, but it all puts in mind of this isolation. And this verse here, I think it said no Houston to whine to, which is interesting, whine. But Houston, yeah, I got no protocol. Gravity's so far away, wrapped on a shrinking ball. Yeah, it's definitely put me in mind of Space Oddity for there's different scenarios, but it's similar in a way because Space Oddity, um, the face of it is about something going to go to space and it's slightly going wrong, but really it's about isolation and isolating yourself from other people around you and society and stuff. Um, and there's isolation in this as well, but due to a different reason. The Houston thing definitely makes me. I know it's ground control. Is it still Houston nowadays? Are they good to speak to? It just puts me in mind of that dialogue. No protocol is like frameworks, and you can argue it's chicken and egg whether someone who's these guys talk about their heroin addiction, whether the addiction makes them then slip out of society and the framework within society, or whether they slip out of society and then the addiction keeps them out. But it's interesting. And gravity is so far away. I've always felt gravity when I hear it in certain songs is a substitute for reality. It's earthbound, tiny, keeping you in place, particularly with this imagery. Whereas dreams and creativity and vision is something that's rising to the ether. And so the reality is keeping you based down. And he's saying reality is so far away. Again, it's isolation. Really interesting. I'm wrapped up on a shrinking ball. Again, it's sort of like that planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do. Similarities, not the same, but similar. And of course, it's shrinking means it's going further away. And I guess he would say he's floating away with his own inertia, but maybe it's his actions that actually is taking him further away. And it's not my fault because I'm further and further away from reality. It's interesting in terms of responsibility for your situation. I don't know what the reality really is from this, but it just all these things sparked to my mind listening to that. It's really interesting. One is it before I forget. So that last bit, he was saying about something about being celestial bound and accepting his fate or something. If he's never found, so kind of accepting he's cut adrift, both in the narration and you know, metaphorically. And then we go into this, which I think is the chorus, and it's just repeating she. Well, I think the she bit is his addiction or what he craves from his addiction personified. We've had this before. It's interesting. I think there's a different beat here now, and it may even be like hand drums, which again, I think is a different signal. Perhaps it really is floating away now, or there's definitely a different. It's a change of pace and trajectory. Interesting. Those noises sound like a bird or a monkey or something. Odd. Yeah. Okay, so it's interesting that last bit is just repeating. It was the interesting bit was the main guitar, like the vocal melody or whatever, was pretty much the same throughout actually. Slight changes. But it's that secondary sounds. They really changed then at the end. And if they symbolized what was, the environmental sounds that's around you, I'd be worried at this point because there's all sorts of shit going on. Maybe stuff's going wrong to the capsule floating in a tin can. But yeah, really, really interesting. And it gives you like that really long fade out. It's just like it gives you the impression of this capsule just tumbling through the darkness, the edges of the galaxy into infinity, and it's still going. You just can't hear it anymore. Yeah, for quite a simple song, there's some really interesting imagery and stuff going on there. I've enjoyed it probably the most out of the failure songs I've heard so far from Andy. I said probably, definitely. Um, yeah, let's get back and let's chop it up with him.
All right, so ground control to Major John. What did you think of Another Space Song?
Interesting. I was about to say ashes to ashes, funk to funky. We know Major Tom's a junkie. Um, yeah, interesting. So starts with this like guitar tremolo, which ushers in the drum beat, and also other strange murmuring noises lower in the mix that kind of made me think of, oh, amongst other things, made me think of sort of mission control chatter.
Hmm.
Um, a sort of picked guitar accompanies, um, and although it's the second guitar in it, it's really the main guitar, and that's secondary first guitar. Um, then starts to do this rising tone with this clear tension to it as we approach liftoff. Um, and we seem to then hit this certain level, and that pretty phrase riff, whatever you want to call it, the picking guitar continues until the singer comes in. Yeah, it's a really nice start. And quite sort of that. Now, what I know about the band and the album, I easily get the imagery from the music without the lyrics. Um, he comes in. I won't labour the Cobain point, as see previous episodes. But he still sings with that vocal fry, that rasp, which isn't always a friend to clarity.
Hmm.
Um, Covered with that sort of, that sort of grungy slacker delivery.
Yeah.
The loud quiet. So this is the quiet as opposed to the scream. Um, I guess something about smiling back and something about twisting in the sun, and definitely that last line in that verse is something about it's okay to be lonely, and that's ting light bulbs going off all over the place. This is reinforced later on, but I'm struck right there at that moment by the parallels to Space Oddity, as you mentioned. This sense of isolation and use of outer space as a metaphor against inner space.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, Bowie's song was written at a time when we knew much less about the universe around us and space, in particular. I don't think they even considered dark matter or dark energy then. And there was a certain naivety to Bowie's song in a way. Um, but you feel with Bowie, his isolation is um, well, primarily emotional, but it comes from an intellectual separation, perhaps even spiritual at some point. Um, it's not drug induced like these guys. The drugs would come later for Bowie, but not in the shape of heroin that to take the grip of him, as we've discussed recently in an episode about his appetites. So anyway, then we get some. I'm sure I heard the sound, the line something about my missions float away, and so the metaphors continue describing the trials and tribulations of an addict. The music continues in quite a similar fashion to it's done before. That brighter guitar um, is really pretty, and there's a fairly heavy beat behind it, which could easily be a trudge mixed in with the sort of there's a fuzz guitar grumbling underneath it all. Um, but and it's also lightened by occasional sort of sonic effects whizzing by like heavenly bodies. Um, and the syncopation of the drum beat is a doom, 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 dun, dun, dun. It kind of makes me feel almost not quite clockwork, but this simple propulsion from an engine. So all these little things are again enforcing musically um, this idea of being in space and being isolated and almost floating around, or if not floating, then trudging very steadily. Um, I'm not getting all the words, but then I think the next bit is the chorus, and it's she will always be, she will always be, she'll always hide.
Nailed it.
And it may be my perception, but the bright guitar sounds even brighter here. Just seems to come forward a touch. And I guess the she is either his addiction or the object's addiction. We've discussed this before as well. Um,
Mhm.
I believe there is some double tracking on the vocals here, which just gives it an extra soupçon of, it feels like almost introspection, or there's like inner voice talking as well with inside, which is very interesting. I did say in the reaction that previous songs by them have come out sort of the grunge scene and are heavily influenced by it. And the first one I was banged on about Nirvana for ages when I was reacting. This one is not from that influence really. Um, and I'd say that chorusy bit is the closest it comes to, and there's another band I never fail to mention wherever possible, is Pixies, but it's like a slower Pixies picking guitar song. And I think the difference here is Joey Santiago then will put these sonics over the top that are very interesting. Where here, the sonics are clearly effects that, like I said before, put me in mind of like heavenly bodies going past, and they're different speeds and different trajectories, or maybe even orbits and stuff. So it really adds to the atmosphere. I really like what they've done there. Um, then we get to the next verse, and I did pull it back to check because there's quite a few bits in there that kicked off things in my head. So I think I got most of it. Something about I've got no Houston to whine to. I got no protocol. Gravity's so far away. Wrapped on a shrinking ball. First thing I thought was, is it still Houston nowadays? I don't know if it is. But it just made me think of that dialogue between ground control to Major Tom. Just real shorthanded, just wired straight into it. And I guess because I'm thinking about Bowie a lot recently, but there you go. Um, the no protocol, I've got no protocol can mean that there's no guidance or no framework. Um, and you can argue, is it that they fall out of the sort of social network and then, into sort of the underclass or whatever you want to call it and become an addict? Or is it the very fact you become an addict makes you fall out of that social network? But then there's also this sort of link back to it in terms of a sort of responsibility, I don't know if that's the right word, but to a social contract, whether you join in with people or not. Um, I don't know there's plenty of functioning addicts or whatever, so but I'm just generalizing it.
Mhm.
Um, the next line though, I feel gravity is quite often used as a metaphor for earthbound realism or reality, as opposed to imagination or creativity or dreams that tend to rise off into the ether. They always tend to be lighter than air, don't they? And the manifestation of reality is this sort of like little blue ball spinning in the darkness and shrinking away. And again, that's really interesting as well, because it's almost like the narrator would have you believe that it suits his narrative that he is gently floating away, a victim of his own inertia, when perhaps he's actually pulling away.
Mhm.
Um, Again, it's that narrative. And that verse I thought was really nice and interesting. A lot of images there that just ticks things off. And then it sort of brought me to that sort of, am I sitting in a tin can far above the world, planet Earth is blue and there's nothing I can do? Again, the two are not the same, but there's similar sort of intent and stuff going on there. I really liked it. At this point, the distorted fuzz guitar that's kind of low in the mix, you hear it a bit clearer here, and it sounds like a blown exhaust muffler. I can almost imagine toxic black smoke belching forth from the amp, or in this case, the space module. Um, the guitar becomes a bit more excited at the line, and I won't let her down. My soul is celestial bound. I think it's like he's accepting his fate here, that that's it. He's reached whatever point, and he's can continue going. There's no return. Um, We do get a quick little breakdown, just really quick, before that chorus bit about where it comes in and spirals. And to be honest with you, at this point, I've pretty much stopped listening to the lyric. It's the same repeated
You've
again.
done a
It's
pretty good
she,
job to this point, to be honest.
yeah. But the music's really interesting. So it's kind of spiraling like an abandoned module that's broken free from orbit and it's just tumbling towards the dark reaches of the galaxy. And if the main guitar is like the narrative, the second guitar and the other noises probably indicate environment, what's going on around. Um, and I'd be really worried here because it sounds out of control. um, Even I think the drum beat changes, and I think they go to hand drums here, but it's definitely the drum isn't syncopated like it was before.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess that shows a change in course or trajectory. And then this long fade out also adds to the sense of infinity and beyond. I'd say
Excellent.
that. So
I'm
yeah,
digging it.
in just summary, I think it's quite a simple song, but there's little touches in there that make it really interesting and thoughtful. Um, I've said this before, and I don't mean any sort of disrespect by this, but songs by druggies about their drug habits bore me to death. Um, because I'm just not really that interested about everyone who's then taken them thinks it's vastly interesting. However, this sort of the sense of the effects of it, which is the isolation and the disconnection, is interesting. And I would say of the songs I've listened to, this is definitely the one I've liked the most.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's awesome. Yeah, I think that I mean, there are so many goddamn songs written about the drug problems of the songwriter and narrator. But to be able to do it in such a way that is just I guess broad enough or ambiguous enough that you can extrapolate
Yes.
or pull from it that other kind of relationships that you would have not just with drugs but with individuals and therefore the song can take on a larger meaning to a different crowd and it doesn't have to be just so like
Yeah.
I'm hooked on heroin like literal about your storytelling. um Also, when you find a really good vessel for your metaphor, which is this sort of, lost in space kind of approach, um, it becomes that much more interesting and it doesn't make it again so black and white, which I also really tend to enjoy. I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, the first time I heard this album, I didn't know it was an entire ode to, being a heroin addict and a victim of that designation. I just thought it was a relationship. I was fucking 13. It came out in 1996. It wasn't until I was like probably 17 that I started to realize, and at that point I had, become fully invested in between those two periods become fully invested in writing and the mechanisms of literature and similes and metaphors and all this different shit and then also the real world I had a better understanding of at that point too and I said oh my god I kind of get what this is about now and yeah 17 tracks about that or anything akin to it can be a lot but they're really well done and I think some of the best songs written about being in this particular situation. Yeah, I loved everything you had to say. The only thing I would add is that like that real dirgy kind of sound that you heard low in it is I'm pretty sure just overdrive on the bass, giving it all that like black smoke emanating kind of sound that you had mentioned. So yeah, there you go. Yeah, Failure. They're an American alternative rock band from Los Angeles. I'm only going to touch on them a little bit because, as we mentioned, I think at least Saturday Savior is on this channel, if not both that and Stuck on You. I can't remember where we did Stuck on You, if I'm being completely honest with you.
No.
Um, but yeah, they were around from 1990 to 1997, and then again from 2014 to the present. The band's lineup on this track and the album on which it features, Fantastic Planet, was made up of Ken Andrews on vocals, electric guitar, and bass guitar, Greg Edwards on electric guitar, bass guitar, piano, and some percussions, and Kelly Scott on the drums proper. The band has cited a number of bands as influence, the three biggest being the Beatles, Pink Floyd, and The Cure. Failure is recognized for being one of the standouts of the 1990s space rock movement, as you can probably imagine, with a focus on compound guitar effects, uncommon melodies, and an emphasis on substance over style. Failure was a lesser recognized band who started off with their initial 1992 release, Comfort, presumed by at the time to be a post grunge release, and they struggled to get airplay on radio until their third album was released, the aforementioned Fantastic Planet. The self produced and self mastered album, while remaining distributed by their label Slash Records, received little promotion. However, due to critical acclaim, it began to chart on the U.S. alt rock radio stations, only for the group to disband shortly thereafter, when they did Lollapalooza, and then in 1997, right after Lollapalooza, they disbanded. It is now commonly referred to as the best album you've never heard by many artists and music insiders, especially from around that time. After a number of side projects and further music production work, the band reunited 15 years later, as mentioned, and toured during the 2010s and the early 2020s, playing both past releases and new recordings. To date, they have released 6 full-length albums and 5 EPs. Now, the media outlet Vice, of all places, published a great article entitled Failure and the Enduring Mystique of Fantastic Planet, in which writer Sebi Reyes Kulkarni detailed the tumultuous circumstances and process surrounding the creation of this album. And in it, she writes, if you will indulge me, 20 years ago, Ken Andrews and Greg Edwards, the creative nucleus of the 90s alt metal space rock outfit Failure, weren't in the most healthy of headspaces. Corporate restructuring at Slash Records threatened to prevent the band's upcoming album, then still in works, from ever seeing the light of day, in spite of touring as Tool's opening act and sparking a buzz in 1994's sophomore effort, Magnified. In response, Edwards and Andrews, at the time fueled by big ambitions and a predilection for heroin, holed themselves up with recording gear in a space they rented from Lita Ford. With nothing to lose and drummer Kelly Scott in tow, they decided to go for broke. Reyes Kulkarni would go on to add, given the album's epic sprawl, rich production, and haunting overtones of emotional disintegration, it's no surprise that Edwards and Andrews felt like they'd made their ultimate musical statement. But the album sat on the record company's shelf for a year and a half. By the time it was released in 1996, Edwards had succumbed to a debilitating heroin habit, and Failure fell apart not long after participating in the '97 edition of Lollapalooza. Much to the band's surprise, though, Fantastic Planet sparked increased interest after the fact, a smaller scale version of what happened with Weezer's Pinkerton. In 2009, Just Press Play named Fantastic Planet the third best album of the 1990s. And in 2014, Decibel magazine inducted Fantastic Planet into their Hall of Fame, naming it a cult classic, an album that paints its heaviness in a gorgeous way. And as mentioned in a previous discussion we had about this album, record producer and musician Butch Vig calls Fantastic Planet one of the top 25 albums of all time. Edward Banks of Pop Matters wrote an article devoted to the song back in 2013, in which he opined, about 50 minutes after the first notes of the album have already grabbed you in, another space song takes your mood to another level as it slowly builds and sticks to your ears better than most things wish they could. Commencing with a peculiar series of effects that expand into an incredible melody, the softly monotone vocals ride over the busy yet locked drum pattern, while the guitars quietly guide the way. As the song plays itself out over the next 5 minutes, This song and this record as a whole does more than represent the era of overproduced alternative rock bands with glossy singers. This record was released and barely noted because it was none of those things. Great vocals, imaginative guitar work, distorted bass lines are all encompassing this remarkable track. Another Space Song moves beyond the line that Failure wanted to create with this record. It captures a mood of movement and a memory that is locked in with a quiet and remarkable melody from what was one of the best overall record releases in the 1990s. Now, lead vocalist Ken Andrews said of the track Another Space Song, "This song is probably my personal favorite on the whole album. It was called from a jam cassette where I was playing bass and Greg was on guitar. I love the hypnotic repetitiveness of the vocal melody I was working on, and I wanted the lyrics to emphasize this. Greg came up with the space theme for the lyrics that earned us the dubious title of Space Rock Band. I remember telling him that for the end of the song, I wanted a repetitive line that slowly modulated over time, a la the end of Every Breath You Take by the Police." So let's jump into these lyrics. A song I never would have like been, oh yeah, it's just like this, or there's a similar thing. It's just odd. Um, the solar panel's shining face is smiling back on me. Twisting off into the sun, it's okay to be lonely. All my missions float away. I have never trained too hard. I'm so caught up in the tree of stars falling in my backyard. She'll always be what I can't find. She'll always be where I break down. She'll always hide behind a star. I'll always dream she can't be far. I've got no Houston to wind down to. I've got no protocol. Gravity's so far away, wrapped on that shrinking ball. I eclipsed my memories, sleeping inside this pod. Patient, time will carry me on her back without a sigh. I won't let her down. My soul is celestial bound. And if I'm never found, she will always be. She'll always be what I can't find. She'll always be where I break down. She'll always hide behind a star. I'll always dream she can't be far. She'll always be what I can't find. She'll always be where I break down. She'll always hide behind a star. I'll always dream she can't be far. She'll always be what I can't find. She'll always be where I break down. She'll always hide behind a star. And this continues to repeat as the earlier descriptions would suggest. And as you really put it, this idea of just fading further and further away from your planet and off into space on sort of this endless kind of doom loop, which I think is super clever, totally fits the aesthetic and theme of the song and frankly the album. Another Space Song continues a major theme of the album, using the vast emptiness of outer space as a metaphor for isolation and introversion felt in the depth of drug addiction. So, for example, the lyric, "All my missions float away, I never train too hard," suggests the substance abuser's dreams and goals are fading away as addiction clouds it all out. And thus the narrator is no longer actively pursuing them. So, yeah, just a lot of. I guess this also touches on how you mentioned, like, look, I there's nothing I find more uninteresting than a junkie talking about how they're a junkie. But this, I think, illustrates it's not just about I'm addicted to heroin. It's, as you sort of also alluded to, the feelings of isolationism and being divorced from reality, or what once were your goals and aspirations, and those who probably love you, and all of that. So yeah, it's so much more than just, I love heroin, here I am, woe is me. It's uh, much more artistic, I think, approach to writing about it than a lot.
Yeah, like you said before, if we hadn't done previous episodes and you just give it to me as the first track and I didn't know anything about the album, the band, etc., I wouldn't have got addiction from this, but I would
Yeah.
have got Space Oddity and Isolation,
Yeah.
definitely. You know.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's
Which
cause and effects, isn't it? You know.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And on top of just thinking that you would like this song, I also thought, being the Bowie fan that you are in our recent conversations about him, you would probably pick up on
Yeah,
some of the stuff, which also explains why I, heralded you back
yeah,
with that paraphrase. But yeah, man, I'm really glad you enjoyed this one and gave it a go. And
yeah, a lot.
again, yeah, that's awesome. Again, put my heart on my sleeve on this one. One of my all-time favorite albums, certainly one of my favorite albums from that decade that was the 90s. So yeah, guys out there in the listening audience, please let us know what you think of this track. Another space song by the wonderful band Failure. If you've got anything else you would like to add in the comments field below, we'd love to hear from you guys. Also, while we have your attention, please like, share, and or subscribe if you haven't done any or all of those things. We really do appreciate it. Only takes a couple minutes of your time, and it helps us out over here at the channel. So thank you so much. And hopefully, John and I will catch all y'all in growing numbers on the next installment of the Audio Files. We'll see you later, guys.